ultimately, I've been a proponent that the Big 12 does not need to expand because it's not on its deathbed. It's financially stable. It's making more money than ever before. Extremely competitive with the SEC and Big 12 and Big 10, far ahead of the ACC and Pac-12. But from that perspective, the whole win-loss, you're only going to have a limited number of one-loss teams, two-loss teams, that kind of thing. Maybe the conference does need to expand just so it can go back to divisions.
Well, Chris, as you know, there's some old saying about numbers making a liar out of all of us or something like that. So I'm going to trust your figures there. I just want to make sure. I know that I'm earning more money than I ever have in my lifetime, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm in a better place because everyone's making more money. Everything costs more money. Sure. The dollar figures are always going to expand. So I know that during SEC Media Days, I saw a graphic that pointed out the revenue totals for that conference each of the last 5 years, and they have just jumped in the 40 to 60 to $70 million range each and every year. So I'm just asking for a little context because I don't know what the numbers are concerning the Big 12.
The Big 12 has made similar jumps. They've jumped 40 million the last 2 years. In total, the SEC is obviously going to have much more money. They have 4 more teams. So, I mean, but per school, you look at it, and the Big 12 actually averages higher per school. Now, it's hard because TCU and Baylor don't report, but they're expected to be in the West Virginia, Oklahoma State range, somewhere in between there, in third-tier money. And that's what I'm going to talk about, because the Big 12 doesn't distribute third-tier money. The schools just get that themselves from wherever it comes from. But that's not true in the Big 10 and SEC or anywhere else because of the network deals. The conference distributes their third-tier money, so that gets put into their distribution totals. There we go. That's the word. So what you look at, but if you figure in the third-tier rights money for the Big 12, and you look at Texas's $15 million for Longhorn Network, well, that clearly puts them well ahead of any SEC school in distribution. But more than that, Oklahoma's $8 to $9 million, $10 million puts them ahead. West Virginia's in that $7-8 million range in third-tier money. That puts them ahead. Oklahoma State is about 6 or 7, somewhere in there. You look at Baylor. Everybody, even Kansas, is bringing in $6 to $7 million in third-tier money. They're all right there with the SEC and the Big 10.
So these are athletic department numbers across the board, not just football numbers.
Correct.
Okay. So you're thinking on the field, getting away from just the finances, that going into 2017, based on your evaluation of the conference and based on what you saw last year, if I read this right off the top, that the Big 12 is most likely the 5th of the Power 5 conferences, but very competitive with the Pac-12 in particular.
I would not put them last on the field. Like going into 2017, I think they're going to make a step up. I think they're clearly better than the Pac-12, top to bottom, because teams like Kansas and Iowa State that have been at the bottom of the Big 12 for so long, they're getting better. Kansas is significantly improved. I hope Iowa State will be improved. But even the teams at the top, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Oklahoma, we all think they're going to be very good again this year. West Virginia has a quarterback they're extremely high on. They think they're going to be extremely good this year. So 4 deep that they think are contenders for the conference. And then you have TCU and Texas, who have the talent to be good, but we're not really sure what to expect from them. TCU they didn't answer a lot of their concerns from last year in the spring game, and I think that's concerning. So, but if they can figure out their defensive woes, get some consistent play out of Kenny Hill, then they could be a contender. Texas, we won't know until we see it. So, but they have a lot of talent. Baylor, talent, no depth, unfortunately for them. Texas Tech, I spoke about it earlier. I do expect them to be down, but outside of those 2 schools, everybody's trending up.
And again, just to clarify a point that you made earlier, because of the indications on the field late last season in 6 games and being successful in postseason play, but more so because of the financial stability that you just outlined, you feel good about the Big 12 going forward, despite some of the issues in non-conference, the national perception at this point, and a real issue that I've seen in recent years trending toward the lower portion of the Power Five in regards to NFL draft selections and also recruiting rankings.
I think that just goes with the cycle. I mean, in the early and mid 2000s, the Big 12 was very high. And I mean, I think OU put in 3 of the first 4 picks of the draft. And that, I mean, I forget what year that was, but I mean, you look at that, and then Oklahoma State was right there with the top 5 pick that year too. If you look at that, like the Big 12 can get back there, and it's trending back up. I think the spread has kind of as the Big 12 has transitioned to it and kind of adopted it more than some other conferences, that kind of took a hit in what the NFL wanted. And then that kind of took a hit in recruiting as players say, well, these guys aren't going to the NFL. You know, I need to go somewhere where I can go to the NFL. But as we see the spread take over more of college football, and then, you know, kind of we've seen it start to grow in the NFL, I think recruiting could come back to the Big 12 and the NFL draft prospects. See the Big 12 put more talent into the NFL.
Because as you well know, Chris, by extension, the knock against the Big 12 is that you're playing flag football.
Yeah, I would encourage people to look at yards per play or points per possession. Look at some of the second level stats to kind of get a real feel. We've pulled the secondary stats and look at those averages, and the Big 12 lags behind. But it's actually almost symmetrical with the Pac-12, who is also a very kind of offensive heavy conference. You know, is that there's always going to be the discussion, is that because other teams aren't playing offense, you know, or to the level that the Big 12 is playing offense? The SEC, I mean, you look at what they did, you pull their averages, they're extremely high. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to make the argument that the Big 12 is better than the SEC right now, but it's not as bad. The Big 12 is not as far behind as people think. It's not, it's funny, and people can talk about on national radio that you make fun of the Big 12 and all that. But the reality is much closer than people realize. And the play was down. The play was down, and I think last year is as bad as it's ever going to get for the Big 12. And they're still here, and they're starting. I mean, we're looking at all the teams. They're returning a lot of talent. They're getting better. I think you look at the coaches in the Big 12, and that tells you a lot of where the conference truly is.
One of the final points you made, Chris, is one of the points that I make all the time, and I'm certainly in your corner. I think once there has been a national narrative created and groupthink and the media and the big headlines take over and not digging deep into the results on the field, conference perception seems to swing one way or the other, and everyone jumps on board, and then that becomes the calling card for that particular conference. That's what the Big Ten had to free itself from for a number of years, despite results that would speak otherwise. Yes, there's some truth to it, but yes, the Big 12 is not that far behind the other 4 conferences, if at all, on the playing field based on what we saw last year and what we expect to see this season.
With what you're saying, I mean, when the Big 12 was high in the early and mid 2000s, what was the Big Ten's reputation? It wasn't great. But now look at it today. I mean, it's all going to change.
All right.
Now the Big 12's down.
Very good. Chris Ross talking some Big 12 football. We enjoy the conversation. You can join Chris on Land Grant Gauntlet, also his podcast, Quick Slant. Chris, we appreciate the conversation. It was a good one.
I had a blast. Football in a couple of weeks. Really looking forward to it.